you from the Daily Digest, where we serve you the latest news in 8 minutes. I'm Rachel Hugh, and I'm here today with Emma Cranage from the International Relations Committee here at the Daily Digest. And today, we're going to be discussing the implications of the Taliban presence on the Afghani healthcare system. Emma, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, we really want to deconstruct this issue and get a better understanding of what is happening with the Taliban and the current state of Afghanistan right now. Now, the Taliban was founded in the 1990s with the backing of the CIA and the Pakistani ISI to resist Soviet presence in Afghanistan. The government that it establishes in Afghanistan today will likely be led by religious clerics and dictated by the ideals of Islamic religion, already indicated by the reinstitution of the Ministry of Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice. Since the political takeover that occurred about a month ago, the country's poverty rate and hunger rate have soared, while the economy has significantly worsened. With the nation nearing collapse, one of the most severe crises has unfolded in the nation's health service system. Emma, where did this crisis originate from?
Well, as of 2018, the healthcare system in Afghanistan has been dominated by the Sehat Mandi Project, which is an international aid effort funded primarily by the United States, with additional aid from the European Union and implementation assistance from the World Bank. Essentially, this project invested $600 million in Afghanistan's development and is projected to span over a 3-year period from 2018 to 2022.
And what is the World Bank's focus for development?
Well, it intends to focus on the major themes of social development and protection, human development and gender, and environment and natural resource management.
So how much of this funding is actually being allocated towards healthcare for Afghani citizens?
Well, 95% of funding is directed towards the delivery of health services to Afghanistan's patients. And it was agreed on that the program would be implemented through Afghanistan's Ministry of Public Health.
That is a substantial amount. Taking a look back to August 15th, that's when the Taliban took control of Afghanistan's capital city, Kabul, which effectively outs their existing government and civic structure.
That's the same government that was tasked with the implementation of the Sehat Mandi project. We know that with no minister or Ministry of Public Health to receive Sehat Mandi funding, the United States has frozen its aid to Afghanistan, which is now run by one of its recognized terrorist organizations.
And has the European Union taken any similar actions?
Yes, the European Union has taken similar actions, and the World Bank has been forced to abide by the actions of its largest donors, freezing the project's funding and threatening the existence of healthcare facilities in 31 of the state's 34 provinces. If this funding is not restored soon, Afghanistan may experience an exodus of healthcare workers and a 33% increase in deaths in women and children in the next year. Areas of healthcare like cesarean sections, polio immunizations, tuberculosis, tetanus, measles, malaria, HIV, childhood nutrition, family planning, and routine health services could slow or halt by the end of 2021 if no drastic action is taken.
So in what ways has the Sehat Mandi project actually aided in the progress for the Afghanistan healthcare scene?
To answer your question, Rachel, the implementation of the Sehat Mandi project has allowed Afghanistan to significantly progress on issues like tuberculosis and maternal mortality. Mortality rates of women and children have decreased by 50%, and the average female lifespan has extended by a decade.
Well, that's great news. What about in context to COVID-19? How has the withholding of aid impacted Afghani communities on a domestic standpoint?
Well, in addition to this, Afghanistan is currently bracing for a 4th wave of COVID-19 infections shortly following its 3rd, with no hope of vaccination rollout under its new administration and only 5% of its population vaccinated. Hospitals have also struggled to care for those injured in revolts against the Taliban's takeover.
So not only does the withholding of funding freeze the possibility of further healthcare progress, but the existing improvements are at risk of being lost. The project is primarily executed through the work of 30 non-governmental organizations. When the funding pause occurred on August 31st, almost all announced that they would not be able to continue their work past September 5th, which was almost under a week away.
Well, Rachel, one silver lining is that the World Health Organization plans to spend $66 million to keep 538 healthcare facilities in the nation operating until the end of this year.
Through a historical lens, global public health issues have led many Americans to realize that being a powerful nation and participating in globalization is not a one-way street for homogeneity. We can also see how viruses transform globalization. For instance, during a global pandemic, many countries who profit off of cheaper labor from foreign countries would feel the downside of globalized labor. We can see this occur today during the COVID-19 pandemic between German companies relying on the more inexpensive Asian labor force. And cohesively with this cutback on overseas production, the laboring countries are being hit hard with the lack of jobs. This phenomenon is negatively impacting the global economy and stagnating the flow of money, which raises many to question whether we need an economic stimulus.
To comprehensively understand the cause of the medical crisis in Afghanistan, it's important to consider the three contexts of realism, liberalism, and constructivism. Each provides a different perspective on what motivates world politics. In realism, the motivator is power. In liberalism, the motivator is peaceful freedom. And in constructivism, the motivator is ideology. I don't know about you, but I can see every theory's impact here on some level.
Me too, but I think a good place to start might be with constructivism. The Taliban and Mahdi funders are primarily at odds because they have different political ideologies, and I think the impact of these differences can be clearly seen in this crisis in Afghanistan.
I mean, let's think about the specific ideologies in this situation. Assuming that an ideology is a bridge between moral philosophy and political action, the Taliban is an extremist organization that intends to restrict the freedom of its subjects through religious imposition. The United States and European Union are democratic states that make it their mission to protect and preserve liberty, even though that is inevitably not always the result. If you put yourself in their shoes, you have to ask, is funding operations under such a regime being tolerant of intolerance? Which choice is the most ethical one?
But the decision isn't whether to empower the regime or not. The United States and European Union are choosing whether the people living under the Taliban still have a right to receive health care. In my opinion, they do. This issue ties into liberalist ideology with emphasis on intergovernmental organizations and non-governmental organizations and their prevalence in the process of world politics. I see the contention of ideological politics interfering with human rights aid, but from a global human rights perspective, it shouldn't omit regard for civilian lives.
I agree with what you're saying, but I can't see its reflection in this event. IGOs and NGOs are supposed to be politically independent, but the 30 working to provide healthcare in Afghanistan have all been unable to continue their work since the change in funding, and that change was dictated by the ideological beliefs of the United States and European Union. Can we really say that the NGOs are politically independent?
I see, Emma. The main powers in the situation are really the United States, the European Union, and the Taliban. Considering that the United States is a hegemon, its dramatic influence over the situation comes as no surprise, and its governing parallels to the European Union, which renders it unsurprising that Europe would follow so closely in U.S. footsteps.
Right, but the Taliban is an important power too. Simply the ability to create such an insurgence has led to the situation itself, and while it is significantly smaller than the United States or European Union, its ability to resist the imposition of their political will is incredibly significant.
Well, we're going to be wrapping up soon, but I wanted to ask from a liberalist viewpoint, would you consider the World Bank an important power? Because in this case, its actions have been bent to the will of its donors, so do you think the World Bank is flexing political power, Emma?
I can't see how. The World Bank identifies its mission as promoting financial and technological assistance to encourage development and provide solutions to the challenges that countries may face. While their mission is certainly legitimate, it has helped countless nations towards societal development, they remain powerless without the backing of their funding states. While they can certainly potentially impact global politics, they are, to a certain extent, the puppet of greater national powers.
Well, again, thank you so much for joining us, Emma. It was lovely chatting with you.
Of course. Thank you for having me.